Now, let's focus on the airspeed indicator itself. The placement of each of the colored markings indicates a very important speed limitation that you need to be aware of and follow. These are called V-speeds, and each one is a specific velocity that the FAA wants you to know. So regardless of the style of airspeed indicator in your glider, you understand and adhere to each one. For these examples, we'll use the airspeed indicator on the left. It's figure 4 in your test booklet. You might notice the speeds are a bit too high for a glider. Again, this is because the test uses an airplane's airspeed indicator, but the concepts apply exactly the same to your glider. Let's start with the white arc, and that is the flap operating range. On this aircraft, it goes from 55 to 100 knots. And even though many gliders have either spoilers or dive brakes, the white arc is specifically for flaps. The bottom and the top of each arc have special V-speed names, and they're written in all capital letters with the letters of the specific speed written lower as a subscript. The bottom of the white arc is your VSO or stall speed in the landing configuration. That's the stall speed with the power off if the aircraft has an engine, and with both the flaps and gear in the landing position, and that means down. The way I remember is that O stands for out. So it's the stall speed with the landing gear and flaps out. At the top of the white arc, we have your VFE, or the maximum flap extended speed. Flaps extended, that's what FE stands for. We love landing with flaps because it lowers our stall speed, allowing for slower speeds during approach and landing, but we do have to be careful. While the flap mechanism is pretty tough, you can see how far it extends downward from that wing. So if you fly too fast, the air pressure on it can bend and damage that flap mechanism, and you don't want to do that. Next is the green arc, the normal operating range. And on this aircraft, it goes from about 58 knots to 165 knots. At the bottom of the green arc is your VS1 speed, and the FAA says that's the stall speed in a specified configuration, which is with the power off, again if the glider has an engine, and the flaps and landing gear retracted. You'll also hear this referred to as the clean stall speed. The way I remember this one is to pretend that number 1 is actually a capital letter I that stands for in, I-N. So it's the stall speed with everything in. At the top of that green arc, at 165 knots, is VNO, the maximum structural cruise speed. That's the speed where anything more than light turbulence could cause structural damage to your glider. Now for the yellow arc, the caution range, which goes here from 165 knots to about 208 knots for this aircraft. We already have a name for the bottom of the yellow arc, VNO. So let's go to the top of the yellow arc, the red line, and we call that VNE, or your never exceed speed. And the FAA wants you to know that VNE is the maximum you can fly in calm air. So if you're flying on a particularly calm day, usually early in the morning or late in the afternoon, it might just be calm enough that you can fly your glider all the way up to that VNE, or your red line speed. In gliders, you'll often have an additional marking, a little yellow triangle, and this is the minimum recommended approach speed for when you're landing. You will often increase your approach speed based on the winds or sink at the time of your landing, but that is the minimum speed the manufacturer recommends. There are also a few V speeds that are not shown on your airspeed indicator. In the glider's flight manual, also called the Pilot Operating Handbook, you'll find additional airspeed limitations, and these limitations can also be on little placards that are required to be in your glider's cockpit itself, as you can see on those white placards on either side of this glider's cockpit. You'll want to become familiar with the limitations of your particular glider as you progress through your flight training. Probably the most important airspeed that is not shown on your airspeed indicator is your VA, or your maneuvering speed. As we discussed before, that's the speed that if you fly below it, even severe turbulence won't cause damage to your glider. In fact, if you're flying at or below maneuvering speed, you could pull all the way back on your stick and the glider will stall before you can cause damage to it. But I wouldn't recommend it unless you want to scare your instructor. Another airspeed limitation that isn't shown on the airspeed indicator is your VLE, or your maximum landing gear extended speed. And on gliders with retractable landing gear, flying too fast with the landing gear down can also damage it and damage the landing gear doors, which are actually pretty thin. You'll also have your max speed when you're on aerotow and another for when you're doing a winch or an auto launch. And these are to limit the stress on that tow hook mechanism and the structure where it's mounted to the glider. Now, let's look at how the FAA will ask you about these on your knowledge test. And the FAA has lots of ways they can ask you these questions to make sure that you understand these speeds. The FAA can ask you about the color of an arc, the name of an arc, the symbol for a V speed, the definition of the V speed, or the numbers on the airspeed indicator. So the FAA really wants you to understand this. Refer to Figure 4. Which color identifies the normal flap operating range? Well, that's the white arc, or C. And just remember, even if the question doesn't specifically tell you, you can always open your test booklet to that Figure 4 to help jog your memory. Seeing the airspeed indicator in front of you can keep you from getting tripped up by a tricky question. VSO is defined as, remember, VSO means stall speed with the flaps and landing gear out. So it's A, stalling speed or the minimum steady flight speed in the landing configuration. VNO is defined as the, now be careful on this one. The FAA is trying to trick you because the green arc is the normal operating range. But the question is asking for the specific speed at that top of the green arc, the maximum structural cruising speed, and you can also use Figure 4 for this one. What is the caution range of the glider? Well, that's easy. The caution range is just the yellow arc, and it looks like it starts on that shorter white line above the 160 number. So that's 165, and it goes up above 200, so about 208, and that's answer C, 165 to 208 knots. What does the red line on an airspeed indicator represent? Open your test booklet to Figure 4 to help yourself out here. It's the very last thing marked on the airspeed indicator. It's red. So that is C, the never exceed speed. What is an important airspeed limitation that is not color-coded on airspeed indicators? And that's your VA, or your maneuvering speed. Let's do just one more. Which V speed represents maximum landing gear extended speed? Velocity of the landing gear extended, VLE, or answer A, easy. And that's what the FAA wants you to know about V speed.